was a fairly rigid kind of discipline that you had to put yourself into in order to communicate whatever it is that you wanted to say. And I was so pleased when I first got my first scientific paper published in a journal in 1961. It was something to do with marine plants that live in the Gulf of Mexico. I had to hold back my enthusiasm for the joy, what it was like to go out and explore, and be the first to go diving in some places in the Gulf of Mexico that no one had ever seen before, and make these really cool discoveries, and to change the way people thought about what actually lives in that beautiful part of the world. I had to just squelch it all back and just speak in a very disciplined kind of way. That's the way scientists communicate. You know, if you add something that suggests that you really love what you're doing, you've got sort of knocked back and said, no, you have to do it with a more disciplined way. Well, you do get to communicate facts and figures in a very straightforward fashion. It's still true in the scientific journals that we tend to read today, but the passion is not there. And it's passion combined with the knowledge that makes a big difference in terms of what we actually do with the knowledge. It was actually the National Geographic that sort of kicked me out of my mode of being the kind of scientist that I had been before. And that was one who communicated in a very disciplined way and hold back on anything that looked like enthusiasm. And in 1970, I had an opportunity to, as a scientist, writing a proposal that was along those disciplined lines, say what I wanted to do during an opportunity to spend 2 weeks of living underwater, to be with the fish, to get to know fish, to see the interactions among creatures that live on a coral reef in the US Virgin Islands. Well, I was prepared, and I did actually write several articles in the normal disciplined scientific way. But the National Geographic actually knocked on my door and asked me if I would please write an article about what it was like to live underwater, bring out some of the enthusiasm, some of the passion, to combine with what I actually discovered as a scientist. Well, I'll tell you, my first reaction was, I can't do this. I told Bill Graves, a legend at the National Geographic. I did not say, hell no, but that's what I thought. He probably read between the lines, or thought between the lines, because I was almost indignant that the National Geographic, a magazine that I've loved since I was a kid, our house that I grew up in as a kid, sort of was leaning like this because the geographics were piled on one side of the house. You know, it's the geographic side. It caused a whole tilt in the floor of the room where they were stored. But the reason? Because scientists, if they crossed the line and spoke or published to a popular audience, were regarded as popularizers, and it hurt their reputation as scientists, it was thought. Fortunately, that's changing. But in the 1970s, the 80s, and even now, there is a cost to a scientist who will make that leap and embrace the technologies, the new forms of communication that are not traditional. And it has cost the field of science, it's cost scientists, I think, to be constrained not to embrace the new means of communication. And it is, fortunately, changing. What changed me and caused me to say yes, okay, I will write this article for the National Geographic. Imagine they asked me to write for them. That hasn't happened since, although I've done some more. I usually go on my knees, please will you let me write another article. It was a book on my shelf that had been written in the mid-1800s by Thomas Huxley, a notable scientist of his time, contemporary of Darwin. He had written a book called On Discourses, Biological and Geological. Not a title that would encourage a bestseller status. But somehow, a copy had made its way to my shelf, and it was just fortuitous that I looked at it at that moment after I had been asked to write for the Geographic. And I was just flipping through it, and there's an article in that, an essay in that book called On a Piece of Chalk. And Thomas Huxley, to a group of carpenters in Norwich, England, in 1857, took a piece of chalk that had been extracted from the white cliffs of Dover, and he described the history of the North Atlantic Ocean, the geologic history, the biological history, based on the organisms that were contained in that piece of chalk. And he had me, a scientist, 100 years later, more than 100 years later, mesmerized. And I thought, well, this is Thomas Huxley. And so I continued in the book, and then I read in the introduction, he said, your fellow scientists may scorn you for speaking and communicating to the public, but you have an obligation to do so, to give back. They support you in the work that you do. You're a citizen at a point in time when people need to know what you know. The one thing you must do as a scientist is tell the truth. It's the most beautiful, important thing to communicate, the truth. Well, okay, so I did my best. I knocked myself out of my own complacency and wrote the article for the National Geographic and haven't looked back. And I have, like Carl Sagan, paid a price. People don't regard you as quite the same sense of seriousness that they do for those who choose to just stay with the scientific articles and the jargon of science. But at this point in history, knowing what we now know, I think we have to pull out all stops. I think we do have to mind that mandate of Thomas Huxley. Got to tell the truth. Got to say it the way it is. It's okay, like Peter Benchley, tell a story. But let people know this is a story. Sharks really don't stalk people to bite them. It's a great story, but it's not a true story. And people should not confuse fiction with fact, and not stretch the facts to make a good story. The best story is the real story, the true story, the miracle that we live, this little blue speck in a universe of unfriendly places, and that we're at a time of unprecedented change, and that we have the power through the means of knowing, that we will hear more about during the next few minutes, to communicate what is known that can inspire us to take the right decisions at the most critical point that humans have ever faced. I call it the sweet spot in time, because never before have we known what we now know, or could know. We couldn't know it when I was a kid, when Darwin was a boy. Going forward, another 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 years, if we stay on the present track, where are we going to wind up? This is the time. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sylvia. We're glad you took that chance, and I'm even happier that you're showing a model for other scientists to take the liberty that we all must take in order to become more effective communicators and step out of that box that's completely inappropriate, the one that we struggle with if we're raised as scientists. So thanks again. Are you ready, Frank? So now we'll give Frank Biasi another shot with integrating multimedia and maps to tell stories and engage the public.
So, yeah, I wanted to focus on maps because I think as a conservation community, we actually have not been doing a great job of integrating maps into our communication messages and could be doing better. So, I wanted to kind of focus on some ways that I think that we can do a better job of using maps and integrating, and I think a key to that is really integrating them with our other multimedia. I'm doomed today. You want me to come back there?
Conspiracy or what?
Did the projector stop?
I think the projector went off because it wasn't used for a while. It's coming on. You'll see what comes up there.
Tell us what you do at Geographic.
So I'm the Director of Digital Development in the Maps Division at Geographic. And what that means is I produce websites and mobile apps and interactives, primarily focused on communicating conservation, environmental issues, raising awareness, that sort of thing. I've been in the conservation community for many years. I worked for the Nature Conservancy before coming to National Geographic. My background is in GIS. Okay. The graphics are really key to my presentation, so I'm going to kind of wait until they come up.
Thank you.
But a lot of the projects are working with partners, other NGOs, to produce these sorts of products. A lot of sort of custom work, so I don't work as much on the maps that you might see in the magazine or on nationalgeographic.com. My stuff is more with partners. It's off of the main National Geographic channels. I get to work on print maps as well, which is pretty fun. I'll show you some of those. I should have brought them. I could just holding them up and using those as my props.
Let's ask questions now for Frank.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, I think we're in business. Okay, so the main topic I want to focus on in this talk is how can we better integrate maps into our communication and education efforts. Some of the key points here are that location and scale and spatial relationships really are key factors in conservation, as all of you know. And I think it's important that we communicate that through our communications to non-technical, non-professional people who may not even be very interested in conservation. And the fact is that some people are really into maps, love to explore and dig into maps and read them, but a lot of people aren't. They're intimidated, confused by them. And I think that as a community, most of our maps that we're producing are either too complex for those general non-technical people or too simple to really engage and inform people about projects and our activities and the issues that we're trying to address. So what do I think makes a map universally engaging and interesting to non-technical, non-professional people? Of course, elegant, well-designed cartography, and by cartography I mean the symbols, the lines and points and features and placement of everything on the map, the colors, as well as beautiful, well-placed photography and illustration. That's really what draws people into, non-technical people, into the maps. And then short, well-written captions and notes and text on the map. And then a very careful balance of all three of these main elements. And I'm very privileged to work for an organization that sets a standard, a gold standard for creating engaging, interesting maps that non-technical people will get into. And I just love this map. This was one of the supplements in the magazine that came out a few years back. The other side is awesome too. It's the Western Hemisphere. It's vertical, and it's just what you can see here is the map. Actually, the map is secondary to these beautiful illustrations of birds from the National Geographic Field Guide to Birds. They kind of repurposed those illustrations on this map. You can see all the migration routes there. Here's a map that I worked on. This wasn't a magazine supplement. This is one of these sort of custom projects that I mentioned where we work with partner organizations to produce maps, focus on specific topics. So this was a map we did with NatureServe, funded by the West Hill Foundation for Nature, for the Landscape America project, which there's a whole online website called landscape.org that you can go check out. It has lots of data and photography. But here you can see a map of the ecoregions across the U.S. and the protected areas broken out by different types of protected areas, state, federal, et cetera. And then a whole series of different maps showing different aspects of the conservation enterprise across the U.S. And then the other side of the map is more the kind of threat side. This is the land use map showing in green the undeveloped lands, in yellow, the agricultural lands, in red, developed, and the purple is our oil and gas wells. And we've got, you can see this balance of beautiful photography on both of these maps, photography with the maps and with little bits of text. We've got a little arty on this one doing a photo montage showing different ecosystems sort of from west to east. This is another map we did for the Walton Family Foundation for the Colorado River Basin, and it's kind of a general topographic sort of map of the watershed of the Colorado River. Also shows all the dams and pipelines and canals and infrastructure, and photos that help illustrate the issues that the river faces. But the second side is what I think is the really cool side, being a geek. This is the flow map showing the flow, how much water is flowing into the river from the various tributaries, and then where all that water is going. So the diversions, and telling the story of why the Colorado River does not reach the sea. This mighty river goes dry before it reaches the sea. Here's a map that was funded by the Sloan Foundation. We worked with the Census of Marine Life to produce this awesome map of ocean life, trying to represent the results of 10 years of this amazing effort by researchers around the world to inventory the biodiversity of the oceans. Shows all the tracks from these different species. This is the second side, which shows the biodiversity richness. You can see the really rich areas here in the Southeast Asia and the islands, the Coral Triangle, and other aspects of threats and things like that. This was a magazine supplement on the oil spill issue. That was the cover of that was shown. This is a pretty neat map showing all the oil and gas wells and pipelines in the Gulf, and in blue and purple are the leases from these that could potentially be drilled as well. And then this is the second side, the art side of the map, which is just an unbelievably beautiful illustration of the layers of life. I think they got a little dramatic with the sperm whale getting totally hammered by the Macondo whale. But okay, so anyway, what is it about those maps that I think is really engaging, and trying to boil it down to what are the components or the channels of content, of information that these maps are conveying to engage people and inform them. And I think what it comes down to are pictures, the narrative, and the maps. And these pictures really provide, the pictures being the photos and illustrations, they provide kind of the visual stimulus that people, our species loves visual things. It places us at the scene. The narrative and the text explains the map and the issues, and then the maps themselves provide this geographic and environmental context and the actual data for people. And I say channels because it's sort of similar to channels, color channels of red, green, and blue, that together they have to come together to make a full color image. So in some ways, this engagement and information needs to come through these three channels. Of course, digital media offers a lot more flexibility for each of those channels. Pictures can be videos, slideshows, animations. The narrative can be written, text, or spoken, and can include music to really try to trigger people's emotions. And then the maps, of course, can be zoomed in and out, and layers turned on and off, and click on the map to pop up data, etc. So what we try to do is take those three channels now and distill it down to a user experience, a digital user experience that can be embedded anywhere. And we've come up with this format, this multimedia format called Geo Stories, which tries to combine the pictures, the narrative, and the map. This is sort of the title page or the overview of a geostory about a journey down the Colorado River. And this is really the core of what the geostory is. This is a story point, and you can see the geostory is a series of these. It's like a slideshow with a picture and a caption and an interactive map. And this map is fully interactive. You can zoom in and out. You can also adjust and slide these dividers to make the map bigger or the picture bigger, etc. The picture can be one or more pictures. This would show this is kind of rotating through multiple photographs, still images with a soundtrack of an elk bugling, and then there's a little caption, and again, the interactive map. Or it can be a video. So you can really mix in different types of media into it. And this map can really be any map. Any GIS data that you might have, a KML file, could be the map to accompany each story point. So it really is like a slideshow, but a map-enabled slideshow. And then the other interesting thing is that these GeoStories are embeddable anywhere. So you click the embed button, and you can just like embedding a YouTube video, you can copy and paste in the embed code into a page, and it will show up in a page. So here's that story embedded in nationalgeographic.com. Here's another GeoStory that is embedded in a partner's website, Florida Wildlife Corridor, about this amazing expedition up Florida, documenting the wildlife and issues there. Here's a story about the Fish and Wildlife Refuges of the James River, Virginia, embedded in the Fish and Wildlife Services website. And then once an organization has a whole collection of GeoStories, they need to have kind of an index to them, so there's a collection screen as well. So the GeoStory experience is basically these three screens: the title page, the story point page, or the series of story points, and then the collection. And again, that's embedded anywhere. You can change the style and color of the story to match your website. So that's the GeoStory. And then we're starting to integrate GeoStories and other maps and content into full websites. So here's an example of a site called envisionthejames.org, which